So, a little over a year and a half ago now, we made a video talking about Planetside 2's sandbox nature, and the importance of that sandbox element that makes the game what it is today. I spent practically all of that video defending the sandbox nature of the game, even though it has every chance to, and does cause some balance issues and pain points for many players in the community. I still think it's inherent to the experience that makes Planetside Planetside. In saying that though, I also don't think it's perfect, but there is plenty of room for improvement, which is what I wanted to talk about today. G'day there once again viewers, this is your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today we're going to be talking about the combined arms nature of Planetside 2 and the issues that tend to rear their ugly head as a result of that. So I want to start off this video by painting a mental image for you guys that I'm sure we have all experienced one time or another. Let's say you log in for the day and you're looking for your first fight. You check out the map and you see a base like, let's say it's, Silver Valley Arsenal. It's under attack. You redeploy into the spawn room to find yourself just being completely and totally blasted by Hesh and air-to-ground spam. What do? Well, probably just find another fight, right? If you were me, that's what I would do. You do that because you are somebody who knows that this is an option in the first place. You know that there are probably going to be better fights out there that just don't see you get completely hash farmed relentlessly. Now, not everyone is going to know this. Your newer players, for example, through no fault of their own, might not know that this fight isn't worth sticking out, and they'll just keep beating their head against this hash brick wall. And in a really harsh way, this does sort of teach them about the truth of the experience as it stands right now in Planetside. This element of being farmed. This is just a reality at times. Cobalt Sunder is sitting on capture points, Hesh tanks sitting on hills plonking damage from God knows where like mountain goats, and Liberators literally carpet bombing a 50-meter radius because, well, the license to live has expired for everything down there. Let's be honest, no one likes being spawn room locked by a bunch of vehicles running Hesh of any kind, especially newer players. I know at times a lot of focus is drawn towards high-skilled veteran players dunking on new players incidentally via infantry combat, but let's be honest here, how many of those newer players do you reckon are going to stick around after an initial experience that just ends up being on the receiving end of a Hesh farm? I would argue that the bounce rate of players is probably higher when they have to deal with Hesh spam over high-level infantry play. Even if they're sitting in a platoon getting the world's best advice from the most charismatic leader out there, if they aren't having fun with the core gameplay, they aren't going to stick around and they're going to lose interest. And I don't know why, but this kind of stuff has been sticking out to me a bit more lately, which got me thinking, does this culture and meta surrounding vehicles actually need to be as prevalent as it is right now? Can vehicles in this game be something more? And no, I don't mean can they be more when it comes to effectiveness against farming infantry. That's the opposite of what I want. I mean more from the perspective of functionality within the game's objective. Now, don't get me wrong guys, I think Planetside 2's combined arms elements right now as they stand can be great at times. One of a kind when it works. If there's a giant armor battle kicking off between two factions on, say, the Quartz Ridge to Indar Excavation Lattice, that's a recipe for some of the most awe-inspiring combined arms action that this game can offer. In fact, is offered within the entire first-person shooter genre. Tanks engaging in long-range skirmishes, infantry supporting with aircraft making quick attack runs, that sort of stuff should never go away. I know that there'll be some in the comment section that'll be quick to say, this doesn't happen in the game, so why are you even bringing it up? And that's fair. In the current redeploy meta, these open field engagements are few and far between, and that sucks. But to me, that is peak combined arms Planetside action, and should be the golden standard for the vehicle gameplay in this game. But the reality of the situation, guys, is that there are countless bases around the maps in this game, and only a handful of such offer the means for a vehicle player to directly fight for an objective like a capture point. The majority of the game's core objectives and the outcomes of the only quote-unquote objective in the game right now, that being territory and continent capture alerts, is decided by infantry play. And in an attempt to have a profound impact on a fight, vehicle players are currently left with two ways to approach the wider objective in this game. That being killing spawns that are driving a fight, or farming the infantry that are driving the very fight as well. And look, we all know that one of those methods of contributing to the fight is more lucrative than the other. And because of that, the combined arms aspect of this game when it comes to the primary objectives of the intended gameplay loop, and not some random open field battle that just started because two Zerg fits collided, is simply down to vehicles farming infantry. And that is where I currently draw a problem with the combined arms element of this game. It lacks any sort of meaning beyond getting to and fro bases killing spawns and just dials down to someone hash spamming a spawn room or a point room and locking out a fight from being enjoyable from 99% of the rest of the populace. Now yes, I still stand by my claims from the last video on the topic, where if someone is bothering you with a vehicle, you can easily pull a vehicle yourself to take them out. Anyone running hash will quickly fall by the wayside when dealing with a proper AP vehicle setup. But what happens when there's a squad of people doing this? Or a platoon? What happens if it's a newer player on the receiving end who doesn't have the respective vehicle or even infantry loadouts to effectively counter that threat? Not to mention that the time you take dealing with that threat is time taken away from contributing to the primary objective of the game, aka the capture point, which then impacts your ability to play the objective like you normally would as an infantry player as well. And I also want to emphasize here as well, guys, that I don't say this to vilify the players who prefer vehicle-based gameplay in Planetside. Vehicles in the game are there to be used, and as it stands right now, that is basically their only effective use in 99% of the fights that take place on the continents right now. It's like how infantry players shouldn't be vilified for murdering new players in combat. It's not like you can choose who you fight. Hell, at times you can't even choose where you're gonna fight. You just go to the fight and you kill who's there. Incidentally, that could be a newer player, and that's not necessarily the fault of anyone in that fight. It's just how the game throws populations together. So if you like playing in vehicles and the only way for you to play in a vehicle and to get something out of it is to farm infantry, I can't necessarily find myself throwing the blame on the player per se, but more so on the way the game is flowing right now. But the end result of all these situations is a massive, awkward disruption to battle flow of the game's objective that leaves very few people happy. On one hand, we have vehicle players looking for a reason to enjoy the gameplay that they've chosen as their primary playstyle, and on the other hand, we have all of your infantry players in the crosshairs getting farmed as the vehicle players search for that sense of meaning. And again, in the crossfire, any new player that gets stuck on the receiving end of that experience who doesn't have much means or know-how of how to directly counter that engagement, well, then they have an unenjoyable experience and they simply bounce away from the game. It's a byproduct of a few issues with the game as to how it handles vehicle gameplay right now. So it's clear that a big part of the problem for me definitely comes down to vehicle roles and integration into the objective of the game at its core, which is a big thing to tackle, but more on that in a bit. There's another couple of factors worth going over here too. Something else that sort of ties into the last point here is also the risk versus the reward of pulling an anti-infantry farming loadout on your vehicles of choice. Right now, there is a huge skew in favor of the reward for farming infantry versus the risk of doing it in the first place. You get into a good position with a hash mag rider on a hill, especially on Hossen or Amerish, and you can just get ready to print those bloody certs. And unless you piss off the wrong player who just so happens to have enough resources and skills to pull a dedicated air-to-ground ESF or Liberator, then you'll be pretty much unchallenged if you know what you're doing. This lacking risk also comes down to the fact that, well, it takes time to counter you, and if a player makes a conscious effort to counter you, then they are dropping a lot of time and potentially resources to do it, potentially for little reward. Collectively, we have a situation here where hash farmers in question are printing certs in a way that doesn't align with the risk of playing that role, and the cost to benefit ratio of countering that hash farmer doesn't line up to counterbalance the time taken away from their primary play style to, counter that player. Now, I also feel there's a case worth raising here in regards to some of the base design in the game and how that just openly invites this kind of playstyle at times. Now, I say this with no intent to belittle developers here, because there is just simply no way in hell I could make an interesting map to play on that spanned 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers, sporting dedicated bases that somehow always took into consideration the angles of potential vehicle farming that players would come up with. The only way I think you would be able to achieve this would be to have a flat map with tall ass walls everywhere that blocked out sightlines. I mean, if you change the height of one mountain in any of the continents, then there's a chance that you could very well just open up a brand new angle for a vehicle to abuse on every base around it in every direction. I don't envy the developers on this front when it comes to base design, thanks to how Planetside 2 is designed right now. I'm just here to acknowledge that stuff isn't easy to do. So via a combination of there being a lacking meaning for vehicles to exist in Planetside 2 beyond farming infantry, in tandem with it being one of the most rewarding and less risky styles of play to engage in as a whole, wrapping up with the base design that makes the gameplay relatively easy to do, and we have a recipe for the issue at hand here. So how do we fix it? One answer that I've heard a lot is that you should just remove all hash or generally AI vehicle weapons in the game from the game, which would certainly solve the issue to a certain extent, but me personally, I would rather approach the issue from the perspective of making vehicular combat in this game mean something more. I am all for tuning these anti-infantry vehicle farming tools down a considerable amount. For one, I definitely think the M12 Cobalt should not have a headshot multiplier. That to me is a pretty simple solution to the balance discrepancy that comes from the Cobalt. But moving on. Unfortunately, the wider solution that I have for this video requires so much work and such an overhaul of battle flow in this game that I don't think it will ever be fully realized. But I like contemplating possibilities of what could be. We also have to ask the question of, does the game have the population to support this kind of concept? Does it have the player mentality to support it in 2021? I don't know. But we're going to continue on the tangent anyway. What if, ladies and gentlemen, vehicles were able to contribute via vehicle capture points at more bases, alongside some changes to base design and map design to allow for that to happen? Allow me to explain my concept here. In Planetside 2, there are countless bases littered across the continent, but as we said before, all of these are either infantry-centric bases or vehicle-centric bases when it comes to capture point mechanics. Very rarely, if at all, are the two ever intermixed. But, you know, beyond the few construction bases we have in the game, it's very much an infantry playing field in regards to, you know, handling the actual objective of the territory. So, what if, at some of these larger territories that are on the map, and even some of the smaller outposts with their territories being expanded out per se, vehicles had their own objectives to fight over, alongside the infantry combat that already takes place on the pre-existing point or points themselves? Let's take a look at a base like Silver Valley Arsenal, for example, the base that we used earlier as an example, because it is very prone to some abhorrent vehicle hash pressure at times. What if we looked to expand the territory out a bit, and also let it accommodate a vehicle capture point that also contributed to the base capture as well? Now, what does this solve, Cammy? I hear you all asking. Won't this just produce more vehicle spam? And yes, it will potentially produce a higher pull rate of vehicles, but if you create a single or even 2 or 3 points of contention in a territory that vehicle players have to pay attention to, that even more so directly affects the outcome of a fight over infantry farming, in a certain way at least, then a couple of things will happen. Or should I say would theoretically happen. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. Firstly, as I said before, vehicles will have something tangible to fight over that can directly influence the outcome of a territory capture, and the corresponding alert, which means that those vehicle players who are a bit more objectively minded are going to gravitate to that objective as opposed to just farming infantry. Now sure, that helps to give our objectively minded vehicle players a means to satisfy their cravings, but there is always, no matter what you do, still going to be the vehicle players who only care about the serotonin hit that comes from heshing a squad of troops from a mountaintop. I get it, you can't change the behavior of that mindset because it's there from the get-go. But here is the magic that potentially happens here, once again, all theoretical. As you create objectives that are designed to generate vehicle-based combat, you'll have a higher percentage of players coming to the fight in their vehicles, potentially running anti-vehicle loadouts. Your good old AP and halberd combos, for example. This happens naturally just with the mindset of being the most competitive tank possible for dealing with an expected vehicle-based threat while fighting for this capture point. So if you're somebody that's at a fight and you decide to yourself, there's a lot of squishy mans down there, I sure could get my farm on pretty heavily right now and just hash the shit out of them, you could still pull that vehicle and start farming away, but due to the potentially heavier presence of enemy armor that could easily send you straight to Pound Town, there is now a more pronounced risk of engaging in that style of play. The risk against the reward has become a closer race, which is a great step in the right direction in leveling out the imbalance of this game's combined arms gameplay loop. The point is, guys, vehicle gameplay in this game could regulate itself when there is a reason for all sides to make use of vehicles for an objective reason. Defenders at most bases don't normally opt to pull vehicles because most of the capture points are infantry focused. Even the vehicle mains in serious ops environments may choose to run infantry because that's just how they can contribute to an alert meaningfully. Now obviously, if you run into a situation where you are hit by a vehicle Zerg, and there's no one willing to counter that many numbers, well then the problem still arises. But alongside the introduction of these vehicle capture points, some adjustments to base design and level design around key bases that do struggle with vehicle spam could also go a long way. I have always held the opinion that there should definitely be larger bases in some areas of Planetside 2 to accommodate larger combined arms fighting, to create multiple points of interest around the map in the form of vehicle capture points alongside infantry capture points that give those vehicle players a means of contributing into the fight in a meaningful way that doesn't negatively affect the overall gameplay of the game. And that's why this is potentially such a huge endeavor. You know, we're talking about changing up base design, battle flow, and map design across the board here to accommodate for these changes, which is why I expect this to never be fully realized. But to me, this is just one of the potential routes we can take to sort of help incentivize healthy vehicle gameplay. I do know that there will be some naysayers in the comment section down below that say that this kind of idea just simply won't work, and I guess my main rebuttal to that, guys, is that we've already seen something like this work in the past. We've already seen an event or some sort of vehicle-centric objective spawned into the game and generate healthy vehicle combat within a certain realm of the game. And that was the aerial anomalies. When aerial anomalies existed, there were pilots all around the skies of Araxis, and a lot of them were fighting in air-to-air combat because that is where the objective took place, and that is the theater of the battle where the objective took place. And sure, the freedom of being able to spawn aircraft for free without an nanite cost did mean that a lot of air-to-ground spammers simply pulled more aircraft as well. But the increased quantity of aircraft that were in the skies that had air-to-air loadouts equipped meant that those air-to-ground farmers were often dealt with too, especially if they were nearby where the aerial anomaly was. So as I said before, the vehicle side of the game will regulate itself if there is more reason for proper anti-vehicle loadouts on vehicles to exist and have a meaningful impact on the objectives at hand. But guys, that is going to wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. This one actually was a bit hard for me to get on paper. I had a lot of thoughts sort of, rummaging around in my head when I was writing up this script. So let me know in the comments section down below what you think about vehicle gameplay in Planetside 2. Do you think this is a concept that may help with the overall health of the game? Do you think it's even feasible in this day and age? Let me know down below, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, backhand the like button. It does go a long way to supporting the channel. And if you're new here, consider that subscribe button. It means you get to stay up to date with whenever we do a live stream on this channel and whenever we release a new video. If you guys want to support the channel further, that join button is also down there for you guys to hit as well, should you wish to do so. As always, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.